welcome to Siska Stitches. In today's video, I'm going to be showing us how to make a sweatshirt without actually drafting a pattern. So this is hobby sweatshirts, this is my own sweatshirt, and this is baby's sweatshirt. So in order for us to begin, what you need is, pattern paper for tracing, and you're going to need an old sweatshirt that you have that you really like and you want to replicate. So I'm actually making this for both myself and my husband because we actually wear the same size, so I'm using his own sweatshirt as a guide. As you can see, I folded the sweatshirt into two. This is actually neat, but I'll be using jersey fabric to make this sweatshirt, and I folded it into two so that I can have like the center front. Then I'm going to trace out the neckline, the shoulder slope, as well as the sleeve. So I'm just going to start from the sleeve. Now, in order for me to do the sleeve, what I'm going to do is to lift my sleeve up like this, and I'm going to trace out the seam. So I just place it touching the pattern paper, and I'll begin to trace it out like this. So lift it up gently. If you like, you can go on to put weights on your fabric so that it doesn't shift during your tracing. All right, so I'm just going to be tracing where the seam is. Okay, so we have done sort of like the armhole, the sleeve head. Now I'm going to go on to trace my sleeve. You want to make sure that your fabric is laying nice and flat, and then I'm just going to trace out this part right here. Come under and then trace as well. So this is where the cuff is. I'm just going to, trace out where the cuff begins and where it ends, okay? And then trace out my cuff just like that. So now that we have done the sleeve, we are going to come over to the main body. And what I'm going to do is to trace out my shoulder slope, trace out the neckline. Then I'll come here, trace the side seam. This is my side seam. Once I get to the bottom, we are going to do the cuff because we have a cuff right here. So trace out the cuff. Then I'll go on to trace my center front and center back. And after tracing, what I'm going to do next is to remove the sweatshirt, and I'm going to use a marker to actually flesh this out so that it is nice and straight and neat. So after fleshing this out with my marker pen, this is what we have. The neck depth that we have here is about 1 inch if I should measure from the top of the shoulder. So what I'm going to do right now is to cut everything out. I'm going to separate the sleeve cuff, separate the sleeve, the body of the sweatshirt that we want to make, as well as the cuff. So guys, after cutting out my pattern pieces, this is what I have. I'm not going to make use of the cuff patterns that I have here because I'm going to be making adjustments to my bodice. Now, by adjustments, this is what I mean. I'm adding 1 inch to the side seam area, but I'm going to be sewing by a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is such that I have enough to accommodate my body, since I'm working with different fabrics here. The fabric that I traced out was knit and is quite stretchy. Then here is my sleeve. I'm going to add 1/2 inch seam allowance at the sleeve head. This is the fold of the sleeve. I'm adding 1 inch here to increase the sleeve width so that it is fitting for both myself and my husband. So what I'm going to do right now is to go ahead to cut this out on fabric. This is the fabric that I'll be using. Like I said, it's jersey, sort of like jersey fabric, or this thick lycra. I think this is thick lycra, so this is what I'm going to be using. This is the one fabric for my husband, and right here is my own fabric. So after cutting the pieces, this is what I have. Now I had to do a bit of joining here because my fabric wasn't enough, so that is why we have this attachment right here. Now what I'm going to do next is to adjust the front neckline. So I'm going to be coming down by 2.5 inches more. We've already cut off about 1 inch, so I'll come by 2.5 inch to make it a total of 3.5 inches. And I'm going to connect it like this, and then I'll cut this out. So the next thing I'm going to do is to take this piece to my sewing machine. Place it right sides, touching right sides. I'm going to sew the side seam, okay, and the shoulder seam by 1/4 inch. Sew here and sew here as well by 1/4 inch. Then I'll do the same thing for the sleeve. Sew the side seam by 1/4 inch. So after sewing the bodice, this is what we have. I've sewn the side seam. I've also gone on to sew my sleeve and I've turned it right sides out. So what we want to do right now is to attach the sleeve to the bodice before we go on to do anything else. I'll just insert the sleeve and let the middle of the sleeve head touch the shoulder seam, and the side seam of the bodice will be touching the seam of the sleeve right around here. And what I'm going to do is to take this to my sewing machine. We're going to be sewing everything around by 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I'll repeat the same thing for the other sleeve. So after attaching the sleeve, guys, this is what we have. So the next thing we want to do is to attach sort of like a neckline. It is called, I think, crew neckline, those type of neckline that you usually see on t-shirts. Okay, we'll do that. We're going to attach a cuff to the sleeve. We're going to attach a cuff to the bottom of the dress. For the cuff part, this is the fabric that I have right here. What I'm going to do is to sew the two pieces of fabric by 1/4 inch. So by the time I'm done sewing, it is going to be less than the width of the fabric by about 1 inch. The width of the fabric is measuring about 4.25 inches. We're still actually going to fold this into two, and there is seam allowance here to attach to the bottom of this. Okay, so after cutting out the cuff fabric for the bodice, I cut out the cuff fabric for the sleeve. Of course, you need two pieces. This is the width of the cuff. Okay, we're going to fold it like this and attach. And this part is cut once because the sleeve has only one seam. I cut this part into two because we're going to be attaching each side at the side seam. Okay, so right here is the length of my cuff. The length of the cuff is measuring 3.25 inches inclusive of seam allowance. Width of the cuff that I have here, by the time I fold it into two and sew this part by 1/4 inch, it is going to end up being 1 inch less than the width of the sleeve at the bottom here. What I'm going to do for this one now is to fold it along the length of the cuff. Okay, along the length. So after folding it, I'll sew this part here by 1/4 inch. So that's it for bodice cuff, sleeve cuff. The next part is the crew neckline that we want to make. Okay, so I measured my neckline and I ended up with 21 inches. So what I did to get my neckline fabric that I have here was to multiply that 21 by 0.15, and whatever I got, I subtracted it from that 21 inches that I measured for the neckline, and that gave me around 17.85 inches, and I added seam allowance. Okay, so what I have here is around 18.75 inches. I'm going to take this neckline fabric to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew this part by 1/2 inch. I'm doing it like this so that I'll just sew everything at once. So my sleeve cuff, my bodice cuff, and the neckline for this dress. So here's my dress cuff all sewn up. Here is the sleeve cuff right here, and here is the neckline band. So what we want to do right now is to begin to sew this up. So for the bodice cuff, I just fold it into two like this and hide the seams in the fold. So this is what I have. I'll do the same thing for the sleeve cuff. We have folded our sleeve cuff into two. And of course, I'll repeat the same thing for the neckline band. Okay, so I'm going to keep the sleeve cuff aside as well as the neckline band. The way that we are going to sew the bodice cuff to the bottom right here is the same way we are going to attach the cuff to the sleeve and also the neckline band to the neckline. Now, the reason why I did the neckline band with that calculation that I explained previously is so that the neckline will rest on the neck of whoever is going to wear this, okay? So that's why you need to do that subtraction so that the neckline can rest. If you don't do that, your neckband will just be standing upright. Okay, so go ahead and do yours like that. Now, this is what we are going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is to wear the bodice cuff onto the bottom right here. So just like this. Now that I've done that, I'm going to pin the side seam of the bottom of the bodice to the seam here and repeat the same thing for this side as well. So after pinning it down, this is what I have. Now, because the bodice fabric is longer than the cuff that we cut out, there's going to be some folding on the inside. So what I'm going to do to ensure that it is balanced is to stretch all of them out like this, and then I'm going to pin the midpoints. So after pinning, this is what the dress will look like. What we need to do now is to take this to our sewing machine and sew it all around. And I need to make sure that while sewing, I stretch out my fabric so that everything will be around the same length. You need to stretch it out so that you don't end up with your fabric, gathering on only one side. You want to make sure that everything is evenly distributed around the cuff. So what I do for this cuff is the same, basically the same thing that we are going to do for the sleeve. Match the seam to the seam, stretch it out so that the cuff or fabric is evenly distributed around each other. I'll do the same thing for the neckline as well with the neckline band. Once I sew it up all around, I'll come show you guys the last thing we're going to do to ensure that we have a well relaxed neckline. So after sewing the bottom cuff, the wrist cuff and the neckline band, this is what it looks like. So the last thing that we want to do is to come here to make the neckline relaxed, and the way that we are going to do it is to push the seam allowance towards the bottom, and I'm going to do a top stitch right around that seam allowance. Okay, so I'll just go right here to stitch on it about 1/8 of an inch away from the seam that we have here, holding this seam allowance part down to the main fabric. And that's it, guys, for this tutorial. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, kindly give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, turn on the bell so you get updates when I post new videos, and I'll be seeing you guys in my next tutorial. Bye.